before the television, before the smartphone, before an entire industry learned how to hijack the reward system in your brain and sell the hijacking back to you as entertainment. These are the 20 things American working men did every single day when the only dopamine they had was the kind they earned. Number 20. They worked without knowing if it would pay off. Your grandfather planted a crop in March without knowing what the harvest would bring in September. He dug coal on Monday without knowing if the company would still be operating on Friday. The work came first. The reward, if it came later, sometimes much later, sometimes never. And he worked anyway. A 1933 Bureau of Labor Statistics report documented that 71% of American working men operated under weekly or daily wage uncertainty. No guaranteed salary, no benefits, no contract beyond the handshake that started the job. Modern behavioral neuroscience has identified the tolerance for delayed and uncertain reward as one of the most powerful predictors of long-term success ever measured. Dr. Walter Mischel's Stanford Marshmallow Studies established that the ability to work toward uncertain future reward without present gratification predicts income, health outcomes, and relationship quality more reliably than IQ. Your grandfather worked without knowing. That uncertainty was not a burden. It was the training. Number 19. They found satisfaction in the work itself, not the applause after. A carpenter in 1934 finished a joint and ran his thumb along it. If it was clean, something settled in him. Not pride exactly, not relief. Completion. The work was the reward, not what the work produced or what anyone said about it. A 1936 vocational psychology study of American craftsmen found that 78% reported the quality of the work itself as their primary source of daily satisfaction, ranked above wages, above recognition, above advancement. Psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, whose decades of research on flow states established the field of positive psychology, found that intrinsic motivation produces deeper engagement, higher quality output, and greater psychological well-being than any external incentive system. Your grandfather didn't need anyone to tell him the joint was clean. His thumb already knew. Number 18. They sat with boredom instead of escaping it. Sunday afternoon in a Depression-era household was quiet. Not entertainingly quiet. Genuinely, uncomfortably quiet. There was nothing to do and no device to fill the nothing with. Men sat. They looked out windows. They thought. They got bored in the deep, slow way that has no modern equivalent. A 1935 Leisure Time survey of American working families found that the average adult experienced approximately 4 hours of unstructured, unstimulated time per week. Neuroscientist Dr. Sandy Mann of the University of Central Lancashire found that boredom activates the default mode network, producing increased creativity, insight, and novel problem solving. The discomfort of boredom is the sensation of the brain reorganizing itself. Your grandfather sat with it every Sunday. His brain was working harder than it looked. Number 17. They ate food that tasted like what it was. An apple in 1932 tasted like an apple. Not like an apple-flavored product engineered to hit the precise sugar threshold that triggers repeat consumption. Your grandfather's food was simple, often scarce, and entirely real. A meal was fuel and a small pleasure, and nothing more. A 1934 nutritional survey of Appalachian working families found that the average adult consumed fewer than 7 distinct flavor profiles daily. Food scientists at major processed food companies, documented in Michael Moss's investigative research, established that modern food products are deliberately engineered to hit what the industry calls the bliss point, the precise combination of salt, sugar, and fat that maximizes dopamine release and suppresses the satiation signal. Your grandfather ate food. The industry turned food into a drug. He never knew the difference because he never tasted the drug. Number 16. They repaid kindness with kindness. not with money. When a neighbor helped your grandfather repair a fence, he did not offer payment. He showed up 3 weeks later when that neighbor needed his own fence repaired. The economy of reciprocal favor operated outside of currency and was more reliable than currency in communities where cash was scarce. A 1933 community resilience study in rural Tennessee found that households embedded in reciprocal favor networks survived the Depression at significantly higher rates than isolated households. Research on social reciprocity from the University of Zurich, published in 2014, found that non-monetary reciprocal exchange produces stronger social bonds, higher mutual trust, and greater community resilience than equivalent monetary transactions. Your grandfather repaid in kind because that was how decent communities functioned. The bond it created was worth more than the labor it replaced. Number 15. They entertained themselves with their own hands. After dinner, before bed, your grandfather made things, carved a piece of wood, repaired a harness, built something small that didn't need building. Entertainment was not consumed, it was produced. A 1937 leisure activity survey of American working men found that 69% reported a daily handcraft or manual hobby practiced outside of work hours. Occupational therapists studying manual creative activity have found that regular engagement with hand-based craft produces measurable reductions in cortisol, significant improvements in mood, and what researchers describe as absorbed attention. A state of focused calm, distinct from both work stress and passive entertainment. Your grandfather carved wood after dinner, not because he needed carved wood. He needed what carving did to his nervous system. He just didn't have a name for it. Number 14. They walked away from arguments before finishing them. Your grandfather knew when to stop, not because he was conflict avoidant, because he understood that winning an argument and destroying a relationship were often the same thing, and relationships in his community were the infrastructure of survival. A man who burned a bridge over a point of pride was a man who might need that bridge in winter. A 1935 community behavior study of Appalachian mining towns found that men who consistently de-escalated conflicts were significantly more likely to hold informal community leadership positions than those who pursued arguments to conclusion. Research on conflict resolution from the University of Michigan found that strategic disengagement from unproductive arguments, walking away before resolution, produces better long-term relationship outcomes and lower chronic stress than either winning or losing the argument. Your grandfather walked away. He came back when the temperature had dropped. That was not weakness. That was calculation. Number 13. They let silence be an answer. Not everything required a response. A man who spoke to every provocation, who answered every criticism, who filled every silence with words. That man was a man who could be controlled. Your grandfather understood that silence was a position, not an absence. A 1938 social behavior study of Kentucky industrial workplaces found that men identified as most authoritative by their peers spoke significantly less than average, not more. Research on communication and perceived competence from Columbia University, published in 2016, found that strategic silence in response to provocation or criticism is rated as significantly more confident and authoritative than defensive verbal response by observers across cultures. Your grandfather let silence do the work that words would have done poorly. The room always understood. Number 12. They fixed their own problems before asking for help. Your grandfather tried first. Always. The broken thing was examined, considered, and attempted before anyone else was called. Not because asking for help was shameful, because a man who had genuinely tried and failed asked a better question and learned more from the answer. A 1934 vocational education study found that men who attempted independent problem solving before seeking assistance showed 34% faster skill acquisition than those who sought help immediately. Research on productive failure from the National Institute of Education in Singapore, published in 2016, found that students and workers who struggled with problems independently before receiving instruction showed significantly deeper conceptual understanding and longer retention than those who received help immediately. Your grandfather tried first because he was a man who fixed things. The trying was the point. Here is where the list stops being about behavior and starts being about what behavior was protecting. Number 11. They accepted physical discomfort without negotiating with it. Cold mornings, hard chairs, heavy loads, blisters that got worked through rather than rested. Your grandfather's relationship with physical discomfort was not masochistic. It was practical. Discomfort was information, not emergency. A 1933 occupational health report documented that American working men reported pain and discomfort as routine aspects of daily work that did not interfere with function. A relationship with the body's signals fundamentally different from the modern medicalization of ordinary discomfort. Research on pain tolerance and psychological resilience from the University of Sydney, published in 2018, found that individuals with higher acceptance of routine physical discomfort show significantly greater stress tolerance, emotional regulation, and persistence under pressure than those who treat discomfort as a condition requiring immediate relief. Your grandfather worked through the cold and the blisters. His nervous system learned that discomfort was survivable. That lesson outlasted every blister. Number 10. They kept their counsel, never announcing plans before completing them. Your grandfather did not tell people what he was going to do. He told them what he had done. Plans announced were plans judged, plans complicated, plans that accumulated the weight of other people's opinions before they had a chance to become real. A 1936 community behavior study of Tennessee working men found that men identified as most reliable by their peers were significantly less likely to announce intentions in advance than those with lower reliability ratings. Research by Peter Gollwitzer of New York University, published in Psychological Science, found that announcing intentions to others produces a premature sense of completion. At Sassensaten Baumai, the social recognition substitutes for the actual achievement and reduces the motivation to follow through. Your grandfather kept his plans to himself. He spoke when the thing was done. That was the only announcement that mattered. Number 9. They treated Sunday dinner as the week's most important meeting. Sunday dinner was not casual. It was the moment when the family took stock, not formally, not with agenda, but with presence. Everyone there. Everything else stopped. The week was reviewed in conversation, the coming week was quietly anticipated, and the bonds that the week's work had strained were restored around a table. A 1938 sociological study of rural American families found that households that maintained formal Sunday meals reported significantly higher family cohesion scores and lower rates of individual psychological distress than those without the ritual. Research on family ritual from the University of Washington found that regular structured family meals, particularly those with consistent timing and full attendance, are among the strongest protective factors against adolescent substance abuse, depression, and behavioral problems ever identified. Your grandfather's Sunday dinner was not tradition for tradition's sake. It was maintenance of the human infrastructure that made everything else possible. Number 8. They did not compare themselves to other men. Your grandfather did not know what the man down the street earned. He did not see what the man across the county owned. His reference point was himself, what he had done yesterday versus what he was doing today. The information required for destructive comparison simply did not exist in the volume and immediacy it exists today. A 1935 community psychology study found that men in tight-knit working communities reported significantly lower rates of relative deprivation, the psychological experience of feeling worse off than peers, than urban men with broader social visibility. Research on social comparison theory from Stanford University has established that upward social comparison, measuring yourself against those who have more, is among the most reliable triggers of depression, anxiety, and reduced motivation in modern populations. Instagram did not invent the wound, It just opened it 1,000 times a day. Your grandfather had no feed. His only competition was yesterday's version of himself. Number 7. They ended every day by putting things back where they belonged. Before sleep, the tools went back. The workspace was cleared. The things that had been used were returned to their place so that tomorrow morning would begin without the tax of yesterday's disorder. This was not tidiness as virtue. It was operational discipline. A man who started tomorrow searching for what he left out today was a man who began every morning already behind. A 1937 industrial efficiency study found that workers who returned tools and cleared workspaces at end of shift began subsequent shifts with measurably higher productivity in the first hour than those who left disorder for the next day. Research on environmental order and cognitive function from Princeton University found that physical clutter competes for neural attention and measurably degrades cognitive performance. Your grandfather put things back because tomorrow's work mattered as much as today's. The cleared workspace was his gift to the man he would be in the morning. Number 6. They showed up for people who were not watching. When a man in the community lost his crop, your grandfather showed up to help, not when others were watching, not when credit could be taken, but because the man needed help, and helping was what you did. The audience was irrelevant. A 1934 community leadership study across Appalachian counties found that men identified as community anchors, the people others turned to in genuine crisis, were consistently described as showing up without being asked and without seeking recognition. Research on pro-social behavior from the University of British Columbia, published in 2015, found that acts of assistance performed without expectation of recognition or reciprocity produce significantly greater well-being in the giver than those performed for social credit. Your grandfather helped because help was needed. The not being watched was the point. Number 5. They wore their age without apology. At 50, your grandfather looked 50. The lines on his face were the record of what he had done and endured. He did not treat aging as a problem to be managed or a condition to be concealed. He treated it as information, evidence that he had been useful for a long time. A 1936 community attitude study of Appalachian men found that aging was consistently associated with increased social authority, community trust, and perceived competence, the opposite of the modern cultural equation that treats visible aging as diminishment. Research on attitudes toward aging and health outcomes from Yale University, led by Dr. Becca Levy, found that individuals with positive attitudes toward their own aging live an average of 7.5 years longer than those with negative aging attitudes, an effect larger than the survival benefit of not smoking. Your grandfather wore his age because he had earned it. His face was his resume. Number 4. They made decisions and lived with them. Your grandfather decided and moved. He did not endlessly revisit, reconsider, or seek validation for choices already made. A decision was a commitment, not a hypothesis. The psychological energy saved by closing decisions completely, not leaving them perpetually open for re-evaluation, was energy available for the work that followed. A 1935 decision-making study of American farm operators found that men who made decisions quickly and adhered to them reported significantly lower chronic stress and higher annual productivity than those who deliberated extensively and revisited choices frequently. Research on decision closure from the University of Virginia found that psychological finality, truly closing a decision rather than leaving it open, produces measurable reductions in cognitive load, anxiety, and rumination. Your grandfather decided. Then he worked the decision. The second guessing was a luxury he could not afford and did not miss. Number 3. They found meaning in being necessary. Your grandfather did not search for purpose. He was needed by his family, by his community, by the men who worked beside him, and being needed was the purpose. The search for meaning as a distinct psychological project did not exist in Depression-era working culture. Because meaning was embedded in the structure of daily necessity. A 1937 occupational psychology study found that working men reported significantly higher life satisfaction scores than non-working men of equivalent economic status. Not because work paid more, but because work made them necessary. Research by Dr. Viktor Frankl, whose work on meaning emerged from the most extreme conditions of the 20th century, established that the sense of being needed, of mattering to something beyond oneself, is the primary protective factor against despair under conditions of hardship. Your grandfather did not find his purpose. He showed up for it every morning and it was already there waiting. Number 2. They did not require the day to be good before they began it. Your grandfather did not assess the morning's emotional weather before deciding whether to function. He functioned. The day was not required to present itself favorably before he engaged with it. Motivation was irrelevant. The structure of necessity produced the behavior regardless of how he felt about producing it. A 1933 labor psychology study documented that Depression-era working men reported beginning daily work tasks regardless of mood state at a rate of 94%, compared to a 2019 Gallup study finding that 67% of modern workers report reduced productivity on days of low motivation. Research on behavioral activation, the therapeutic approach that treats depression by initiating behavior regardless of motivational state, has established that action precedes motivation, not the other way around. Feeling ready is a consequence of starting, not a precondition for it. Your grandfather never waited to feel ready. The work was there. He was there. That was enough. Number 1. They went to bed having used the day. At the end of the day, your grandfather was tired in a specific way. The tiredness of a man who had spent himself completely and had nothing left to account for. Not the restless exhaustion of a man who had been busy without being useful, stimulated without being satisfied, connected without being present, used. Every hour had gone somewhere real. A 1934 time-use study of American working men found that the average working adult spent less than 30 minutes daily in what researchers classified as passive, unstimulated leisure. Time with no task, no social engagement, and no productive activity. Research on end-of-day psychological recovery published in the Journal of Applied Psychology found that the subjective sense of having used one's time purposefully is the single strongest predictor of sleep quality, next-day motivation, and long-term life satisfaction. Stronger than income, stronger than relationship status, stronger than health. Your grandfather went to bed tired because he had been somewhere all day. That tiredness was not a cost. It was the evidence that the day had been lived rather than spent. 20 things. No app required. No subscription. No dopamine hit for finishing the list. Just the quiet at the end of a day that was fully used. Your grandfather knew that feeling every night of his working life. The question is whether you remember what it feels like, and whether you want it badly enough to stop replacing it with something easier.